Dober dan, lepo pozdravljeni na tiskovni konferenci konS modula, ki se odvija od 8. oktobra. Od 8. oktobra do jutri, se pravi do 26. oktobra. Tukaj z mano so Miha, Pavla in Mark, ampak preden jim prepustimo besedo, še nekaj drobnih formalnosti. To pomeni, konS je financiran s strani Evropske unije, Evropskega sklada za regionalni razvoj in s strani Ministrstva za kulturo. Namen modula je v bistvu koncentrat raziskovalnih umetnosti in tovrstnih projektov. Prav mariborski pa se osredinja predvsem na delavniški del, na raziskovalni del, se pravi na tudi, bomo rekli, dela v razvoju. Zdaj bi prepustila besedo Mihi in pa da pove več o samem konS modulu, o naboru projektov. Štartali smo s 27. MFRU-jem. Tako je in pa izvoli Miha.
Hvala, zdravo vsem. Hello our guests or
Good morning, Miha.
Zdaj, jaz bi mogoče se sam še vrnil v to, to je tretji konS modul v Mariboru, se pravi 2021, 2020 in 2019 so že bili moduli prej. In mogoče je fino izpostaviti, da smo skozi te tri module, te predstavitvene enote projekta konS v teh treh variantah poskusili tri različne modele. Se pravi, 2019 je bil model, nek razstavni model v stalnih mestnih prostorih v Pristanu, smo predstavili nekaj zaključenih umetniško-raziskovalnih projektov. V 2020 je seveda bil ta znamenit lockdown, ampak to modula konS in dela v Mariboru ni ustavilo, se pravi, v modni hiši smo raziskovalne projekte, ki jih partnerstvo in mreža konS je končala oziroma razvija, smo jih v modni hiši postavljali in snemali dokumentacijo, dokumentarne filme o postavitvah, intervjuje z avtorji in intervjuje z producenti teh projektov. Se pravi, če smo prvo leto bili neka prezentacijska razstavna varianta, naslednje leto neka dokumentarna filmska varianta, je pa tale tretja varianta letos nekaj, kar je dlje trajajoče. Se pravi, Ksenija je rekla, da smo se fokusirali na izobraževanje oziroma preko izobraževanja oziroma ob izobraževanju smo tudi bili sklop v začetku oktobra, sklop Mednarodnega festivala računalniških umetnosti, kjer smo nekatere projekte v procesu predstavili v nakupovalnih izložbah, kar je bila ideja sodelovanja MFRU modula konS in nagiba. Najpomembnejši del, ki ga pa tudi danes tukaj v nekem epilogu predstavljamo, je pa tale projekt TAL oziroma faza TAL projekta UROŠ, se pravi temporalni avtonomni laboratorij projekta UROŠ je projekt, ki nastaja znotraj mariborskega konS-a. Pavla in Mark bosta o UROŠu več povedala, govorimo pa o, če prevedemo v slovenščino UROŠu, vseprisotni odprti strojni opremi za ruralno okolje. In TAL kot temporalni avtonomni laboratorij je od 5. oktobra do vključno danes za to konferenco v Mariboru postavil svoj laboratorij, gostilo se je kar nekaj avtorjev, umetnikov, sodelavcev, ampak tu mogoče bi vključil jaz naše mednarodne goste oziroma avtorje projekta debati. Ali?
Preden predamo besedo, before we continue with our guests, bi še nekaj besed o tvojem oziroma o programskem naboru vsebin za konS modul, se pravi nasploh, tudi o dveh drugih projektih, se pravi Empathy Orchestra in pa dihajoči roboti in pa v Galasu. Mogoče pač sam, kaj odsevajo in na kak način komunicirajo z sodobnostjo.
Zdaj, kot je Ksenija rekla, še ne skočimo do samega Uroša. V mariborskem koncu se razvija 6, recimo pogojno razmišljamo tudi še o 7 sodobno raziskovalnih projektih. 2 izmed, oziroma 3 izmed teh projektov so bili izbrani na odprtem pozivu, na odprtem razpisu mreže konS. To je ena gledališka zgodba, ki jo razvija ljubljanska naveza, to je naslednja zgodba Galus Roboticus, ki jo Miranda Moss in Daniel razvijata, in to je tretja zgodba, ki jo omenila Adamova in Katrinina Empathy Swarm Orchestra. Zdaj, mariborski laboratorij ima nek okvir in neko delovno nalogo laboratorija za robotiko in za urbano transformacijo. Se pravi, skozi projekte se poskušamo dotikati, preizpraševati avtomatizacijo, robotizacijo in kaj to v sodobnem življenju prinaša, oziroma skozi projekte prihaja do nekih inovativnih metod in načinov samega razmisleka o tej temi. Po drugi strani je pa tudi urbana transformacija oziroma premišljevanje tega, koliko se z različnimi akcijami, umetniškimi raziskovalnimi projekti, povezovanjem znanosti in tehnologije lahko približamo oziroma vstopimo tudi v javni prostor, v urbani prostor, oziroma preko Uroša tudi v ruralni prostor. Zdaj, vsi projekti so v različnih fazah razvoja. Galus je svoje faze razvoja predstavil in letos in na prejšnjih 2 modulih, oziroma tudi na modulu v Novem mestu. Adam in Katrin sta zelo močno, se pravi Empathy Swarm, sta zelo močno v povezavi z tukajšnjo univerzo in pripravljajo neko semestrsko študentsko nalogo. Zdaj se pa že malo skoraj pozabil vprašanje.
V bistvu je bil samo razmislek o tem, se pravi o vsebinah in na kak način komunicirajo z sodobnostjo in čemu komunicirajo, recimo. Ampak yes, maybe we should go forward. So we will try to communicate in English, in Spanish, in Slovene, and mix everything. Esperanto. So maybe first question to Mark, as I know it's not your first time in Slovenia, and it's even not a necessary question whether to be in Slovenia or not to be in Slovenia. So
I like it here.
Yeah, okay. How did you come to the idea of this TAL Uroš project, and how did you meet Miha, let's say, and what's the idea and what's the vision? So 3 questions in one.
That's many. That was like 8 questions, I even think. So how did I come to the idea of Uroš? In fact, the ubiquitous rural open science hardware project or activities, it has a long history, in fact, already. And when I was invited by Miha and the konS project to do something in Maribor, I was interested to pick up an ongoing research interest that we already have in a larger global network. And it does go back, in fact, many, many years, also since I heard of a person called Miha Horvat. I have been visiting Indonesia in 2009, and I think it's maybe the first time I met some Slovenes in my life, although I'm from Switzerland, which is quite close by. But I met in Indonesia, I met an artist called Marco Batista and a producer curator called Pezo, and they told me about this place called Maribor, and they asked me, don't you know Miha and stuff? So I met Miha then in 2010-11 when we were preparing a festival on open source technologies and art called Giblix, and since then I've been very active in Slovenia, also doing projects in Ljubljana and in other places. But coming back to Uroš, we have a global network that was also established in this time, 2009, 10, 11, called Hecteria, on open source approaches to doing life science and biology. And a lot of the approaches also involve open science hardware, such as making your own microscopes and other things. And these were projects I have been presenting in many places in the world, and that we have a lot of collaborators, for example, in Indonesia, but also in other places in Europe or in Taiwan or in Japan and so forth. So when I was asked to suggest a project to do in Maribor, I was thinking it would be nice to kind of re-fertilize this larger global collaborative network that we have. And because some travel was possible this year, bring some people also for a focused phase together to Maribor, so we can revisit some of these projects. Some of them are older, like the microscope we have been building for more than 10 years. But revisit these projects, look how they have developed over the last 10 years, share it with our collaborators that are also involved in UROS, and look a bit in a bit newer paths of where can it be employed. How can we use some of the tools we have already developed in a more, call it, rural context? Can we use them in agriculture, in gardening, in farming? Because this was an interest that a few of our collaborators, also Paula Pin, who invited, recently encountered. Some of us moved a bit out of the city, some of us started to buy a piece of land, and we have seen a lot of this open source culture mindsets also kind of now slowly going more out of the urban centers into the rural context. And this was our research interest. It's like some of these projects that we developed, what use case do we have for them in a more, let's say, real life world environment?
Yeah, but maybe it's a perfect time to talk about this, because all these gas prices coming up, all these environmental things, a lot of people are moving out. So the impact of this kind of a project is probably on the long term very important for the world in general, not only for the people are working on it.
I hope so. I don't have a proof, but I have a kind of a feeling or an interest to look more into these real world applications and bringing some of our prototypes out of these, let's say, hack labs or art galleries into the real world. And that's also why we, within this, let's say, group of researchers within UROS, we have selected a group of people to collaborate, which are in very different parts of the world and also live in a very different contexts. So we have, let's say, at the very beginning, since the very beginning, we had a collaborator in Mendoza, Argentina, who also is kind of a hacker and maker, and he already started to collaborate with local cooperatives on permaculture and agroecology, it's called. And he had this interest already. Can we bring some of these DIY technologies to these real, let's say, initiatives that work on restorative farming, agroecology? So not just like making a lot of profits from the grass, but kind of thinking of agriculture as a way of ecological restoration. So he's called Nano, I call him, Fernan Castro. With him, we had this idea already for 2 years, and we used the opportunity now during this research phase of UROS to also compare these different environments. For example, from Maribor, like what materials can we even get here? What are the potential applications of our science, or maybe citizen science approaches in the real field? We haven't done, we're by far not finished. So we used the last couple of weeks mostly to share knowledge within the research team, update each other about the most recent developments, learn from each other. And I think in the coming months, we will then have time more to really try to apply them in an agroecological environment.
Okay, thank you. So Paula, how did you find yourself in this project? And maybe you could talk to us more about the prototypes and also about the future of the this kind of do-it-yourself materials.
Okay, I was also coming here to Maribor time ago. I think one of the times we were also coming here and we were doing like this mobile lab hackathon that was based on having mobile labs to go to out of the urban space to the mountains to research about nature there. And then I have been also applying, developing and using this kind of DIY technologies from 2013 in a community out of Barcelona in rural space also, but was more like a post-industrial space where we were having like this permacultural framework and also having our own cultures of microorganisms like spirulina and kombucha at that time, also kefir. So we were just using all that tools for looking at the microorganisms, looking at the contamination of the river. For example, we were having like a river that was completely full of colors from the leather industry, like bacteria, estrogens, everything. So we were just looking with the microscopes and applying these technologies, even in a community that was out of the rural. And now I'm just thinking on the same ideas, how to apply in different communities in different parts of the world. I think these technologies are super useful for investigating, having data, and going a bit further with the next prototypes we want to do. But also what I'm interested is in all these technologies that are, let's say, not as a hardware, but more like related with green technologies. Let's say how to clean water with plants. I mean, I consider everything in nature is highly technological build. I mean, for example, we have examples on photosynthesis, electrolysis, photolysis, and everything. So we are also like addressing all these other technologies that they were using by our ancestors, and also making an update and looking to mix between this more like, let's say, hardware and soft or more green technology. So everything's gonna emerge from these interactions. And yeah, I think that's it, more or less.
And how do you find your team? Let's say I think that do people just drop in, or do you think about someone who would be able to work on special field and so on? How does this team work? Is this spontaneous or?
So a lot of the people, maybe we briefly can give an overview. A lot of the people that we have involved in this UROS research project, we have already collaborated before. Maybe some individuals not with each other yet. So the collaborators we have are some of my old collaborators, like Urs Gaudens, who is in Switzerland, who also visited for a week to Maribor, and we were since the beginning together in this Hectarea network. So is one collaborator from Indonesia, Jogja, Andreas Yagian, who is also a remote collaborator to the UROS project. So these are a lot of the collaborators we involved in UROS. We have already this collaborative network, and we use opportunities to kind of nourish and bring continuity to our collaborative network. Same with Paula, we collaborated the first time in Ljubljana for a project that even had some similar kind of mindset to work on. But new people came to these topics. In fact, all the collaborators we involved have already been earlier involved in the Hectarea network activities, as well as in another network that is called the Global Open Science Hardware. This is where I met, for example, our Argentinian collaborator. I do believe that some of the developments we want to do, it's hard to have a let's say, anonymous 2 weeks with random people. It can also be a creative environment, but I do believe it makes sense to nourish and establish long-term collaborative networks. So we can go over some miscommunication issues, and we already know that we share certain values. And so this makes it very, I think, efficient and productive to work together. We also wanted to connect our activities of UROS to this GOSH network. That's maybe why you hear the similar sound of it. A few of us have also been involved in this larger, even global network on research equipment that is open source, that can be used for doing science. The global open science hardware has a mission to make open science hardware ubiquitous by 2025. That's why I call this project as a local regional activity, the ubiquitous rural open science hardware, as I said before, with a more focus on the use of this equipment outside of the laboratory, but in the field. Other collaborators are from Japan. Take, I call him, I forgot his full name, who has a fab lab and also works on agriculture and robotics. Who else do we have? We had other collaborators, Fran and Hortense, with whom we also collaborated already with Paula in Madrid once, and who live now in Paris and work on genetic testing for agricultural applications, a very low cost and open source genetic test of viruses and pathogens for plants.
Okay, I have 2 questions.
Just one. Let's start with one.
Okay,
Yes.
but maybe I can put it in one. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it feels like this kind of experiment and investigative approach is also connected with nomadic kind of life. And also during this module, this is the second question, you have also been traveling over Slovenia and also to the Croatia, right? So maybe you could both answer to first to the nomadic way of life and then about Slovenia and state of arts in Slovenia.
Yeah, so personally, since I started with this art and technology activities, I started in Switzerland, but very early on, I got invited also to places, even in Asia, far away, like Taiwan. And I really, in fact, personally enjoyed this activity. And I also saw more and more my role being kind of free. I don't have too much obligation in Switzerland. That this is maybe a value I can bring to this also other regional networks that living this nomadic life, living sometimes in India or Indonesia, and bringing these collaborations and these also ideas and projects into more regional networks. We have a lot of us that are involved, in fact, have this activity that we travel from many places and have had these different possibilities. We also involved another nomadic soil researcher called Julian, who in fact will move to Slovenia next week. He's originally in Germany, and we made connections between, let's say, Argentina and this German who moves to Slovenia for the first time to kind of also, live a bit this global village. I do think that a lot of the issues we have are on a planetary scale, and a lot of knowledge is already available in one part of the world, and all we have to do is transport the knowledge. But then the internet alone doesn't do it. So it also is important since the beginning of humanity that some knowledge travels through people bringing objects and whatever stories to other parts of the world. And I guess you, Paula, have also used to live a very nomadic life, but recently it has changed a bit, partially because of the pandemic, or why?
So the reasons were 2 phases different in my life. One was the one I was talking before, when I was settled in this community, because we were building the space, and also it was based on open source ideas, so free culture. So every project and every event we made there, we were auto-organized. I mean, was autonomy ideally to keep us autonomy and having the resources and everything. So I was spending a lot of time there, but I was traveling time to time. And now, because of social pandemic, I was more settled in my own hometown, back in Galicia. And yeah, I'm now more looking for moving through rural projects. So I was dreaming with this idea that people is going to live out of the urban space, so more in the rural, and then they build their own tools, and we are building events there, like we are going there together to fix something that is needed, to build the stoves, to build like cleaning the water. I mean, like I'm more thinking on this idea of being nomadic now, but through the rural spaces, ideally in like utopia.
Utopia is our future. It's like our ideal future. Is it utopia, or do we think it's gonna?
No.
Yeah, I'm an optimist. I really think like humanity has another like interesting 10,000 years ahead, but I really don't think we will go through a complete dystopia. Humanity is a tough.
But now during this
species.
COVID thing, most of us felt like this is a dystopic world. I think almost.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
I saw many very different like individual examples.
Yeah.
Some people really flourished. Finally, they don't have to go to meetings and can be productive all day long. Other people enjoyed it for writing. Me personally, because I think values I generate are very much these physical interactions and nomadic life. So in a way, I was a bit limited in my main activities. But luckily, I had some other things to do in Zurich during these days. But I wanted to say something else also. I forgot what.
Maybe a little bit more about the prototypes. Can we check them?
Please. So we collected some of the projects that have been ongoing and tried to update them. I mentioned already, for example, the microscope. This is like one example here. It's a very low-cost microscope that is done from a webcam. So we were revisiting this, trying out some newer cameras that might be a bit better quality. So if it's not for a very low-cost workshop, but for a research instrument, we were looking into kind of higher quality and brand cameras. And another one is also here. It's a modification of the do-it-yourself webcam microscope, but using different fluorescent optical filters, which you see here. So we just reduce some colors from the light and also from the sensor to be able to detect specific light phenomena on a microscopic level. And our friends in Germany and Argentina used the microscope for looking at the soil samples and looking at the different animals that are living in the soil, which gives you an insight on the soil health. So these are, like, say, the projects that we tried. Let's kind of work all on the same time on the same things. They work on a documentation. We work on a, let's say, more better quality microscope, or also different applications of the microscope. And also finally updating some of the documentation, sharing them within the larger collaborators on the globe. So we're all of it again on the same stage. You have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. Also, Paula?
No, just to add, like, we were really, we were one of the days of the time we were here, we were also using this kind of microscope with Rob in her rural space to look, for example, for the quantity of yeast that has his culture of brewery.
Beer making,
yes. So we were just using like this methylene blue in order to colorize, to put color on the slides to check how much yeast were alive or died. So we were just applying some of these tools for someone that is wanted to have, he has her own beer. So it's completely useful and applicable also for beer makers, for example.
Okay, and this, let's say, microscope is made from webcam. Is it also is it possible to use the cam from the mobile phone?
It's also, so this time we didn't work, but you can also modify the camera from your smartphone to use it as a microscope by just adding a lens on top. But maybe let's leave a bit the microscope. This is something we have done for many years, but it's always good to revisit because now there's different materials available and also maybe, new ideas on how to use it. Another project we work on, which is also about soil health, is these like big gray boxes here. I don't know if you can go to these gray boxes. I have made a first prototype of this box a while ago. I can even open it. So this is a small chamber with a gas sensor inside. The gas sensor measures the CO2, and we can put the sample of soil into this chamber. It's a defined volume, close it, and then make a measurement to see how much CO2 is released from the microbes that are alive in the soil. And so we revisited this setup, and at the same time, our collaborators in other parts of the planet building the same equipment. And so we just updated that we use a much more easier sensor, also very new, that just came out a few months ago. And we're also updating the software on how we read this data to just like 3 years have passed, so we can connect, let's say, the data to the Wi-Fi or to our smartphone. So this is it's called a CO2 respiration chamber that we rebuilt using very easy accessible materials. This is stuff you can find everywhere in the world in a kind of basic agricultural store. It's piping material from PVC piping. So this is something we also thought it's important that the material we use to build our devices is something that our friends in Indonesia can find if they go down the road, or we can find it if we go up there to Merkur or something, wherever we bought it, I forgot. Yeah.
What's the cost of these elements?
So the PVC piping should be 2, 3, or 1 euro, I would say. The new hardware that we are building now, in fact, this CO2 sensor, this is not such a cheap device. So the cheapest CO2 sensors you find are maybe 25 or 30 euros. And this newest one that we bought, it is a bit higher quality. It is maybe about 50 euros, this sensor. Luckily, we got sponsored by this company, Sensirion, in Switzerland, to give us like 20 of those sensors. And we even sent these sensors and devices also to Indonesia and to Argentina. And then you need some other microcontrollers to analyze the data and send the data to your phone, which is maybe 20 euros on top. So it's not the cheapest device. So this whole package is maybe even 100 euros all in all with battery. But if we compare this to a scientific equipment that people buy in the research laboratories, they usually pay maybe 1,000 for this stuff. So it's still much more affordable than the normal research equipment. And it's also as an activity, it's something we can build together with students or something as a kind of do-it-yourself workshop, and then people can bring it to their own environments and start measuring the soil microbial activity at home. As Paula already said, so we have also started also to work with a few of the local practitioners. We were having our temporary laboratory was set up in the GT22 Hack Lab, and we also collaborated with Rob Canning, who starts also farming, but who has a history in open source technologies and arts, and also with Monika Pocirnic and Mate Modrinjak, who all of them have a bit similar experiences looking at different agricultural topics in their own environment using these low-cost tools. And the last tools we investigated are maybe these two. As I said, we invited people from Paris who already developed this genetic testing method called LAMP. This is the reader. This also works with fluorescence. So we have different wavelengths of light. And then if we want to detect the presence of a virus, we add some reagents like biomolecular reagents and do a simple cooking session. And then with this, we can read out if a virus is present or not by a green light that would show up if we have the sample in there. So this is something for me, this was new. And when Fran and Hortense were here, we were discussing different applications in the agricultural setting. Existing, they already use it to detect, for example, genetically modified crops in food. This they already had, and we then also redesigned the reader so we can 3D print it and improve some of the designs. So when we talk about open hardware, one of the key value that is generated is not you invent something and make it open. It is other people using your open hardware instructions that creates the value. And then when they use it in a different context, they might find small improvements, and this kind of then knowledge is shared back into the common pool of the open hardware. And this is quite different, I think, to this zeitgeist of innovation, where everybody is really supported to invent something new. The open hardware, the value is not the new. The open hardware value is generated when you copy or whatever, clone someone else's hardware and find other uses, redesign it, and share back these improvements into the public domain. And this is what we were really celebrating. That's why we were also, all of us worked on the same stuff. Some of it existed already, but we improved it, we learned it, we made maybe smaller or bigger redesigns of the existing projects.
And maybe we can go back now, as you were talking, also to the students. You have visited some places in Slovenia and shared this knowledge and shared this kind of work. Maybe Miha, in Slovene or in English, can you tell us more about this kind of work and what's the uspeh or domet?
Maybe I try to wrap up or translate everything what Mark and Paula said right now. So it's
everything.
Like,
Yes.
A lab, a community working together, sharing, improving.
Yeah. So maybe one sentence that I wanted to translate as well is something we discussed with Miha a long time ago. If there is already, let's say, a funded project, and we have even international guests here, it is crucial to make sure we interact with local communities. And we did this very well, I think, especially with the community around KT22. And then Slovenia is not a huge country, so it takes an hour and you're in another city. And because I have been to Slovenia before, I think it was for me very important having these guests that were here, also bring them to some of our older partners or also friends. So, and Miha very much shares this mindset that if one institution invites something in a city like Maribor, then let's make sure we also, have maybe a presentation or a dinner or a little workshop with other people. And that's why both of us worked on this. Miha with his own contacts through the konS network, and I also brought them to Ljubljana and to Zagreb through also all the contacts I had from earlier collaborations. So Miha.
And now the translation.
Everything.
Translate everything, and then
Paula will translate everything into Spanish for our global audience. Everything.
Mislim, zdaj se mi zdi, da če bi šli po alinejah, pač zgodil se je nek mesečni odprt laboratorij, znotraj katerega so avtorji povabili in sodelovali in v fizičnem prostoru tukaj v Mariboru za sodelavci in preko spleta in preko nekih kanalov za globalno mrežo ljudi, ki jih odprta kultura, odprta strojna oprema, deliti stvari med sabo, skupaj razvijati, uporabljati in razvijati in potem nazaj deliti, ki jih v bistvu te metode, ki so na nek način, rečemo celo alternativa potrošniškim, uporabniškim metodam in so na nek način kot metode sobivanja, sodelovanja, souporabe, družbene inovacije, ki jih nismo razvili zdaj, se jih pozna že več časa, jih človeštvo uporablja že v svoj razvoj in bivanje na tem planetu, ampak so na nek način zaradi sistema, v katerem politično-ekonomskega gospodarstva živimo, zanemarjene ali pa na nek način pozabljene. Zdaj, mislim, povzemati, mogoče ni smisel povzemati, pač dejstvo je tako, ta začasna avtonomni laboratorij in projekt Uroš je v tej fazi bil v Mariboru, deloval tukaj, za svojo globalno povezavo, hkrati pa smo seveda se premaknili, kar se tiče konS mreže v Gorico, v X-center, kjer smo z študenti oziroma razvili spet eno temporalno laboratorijsko situacijo ali pa neko enostavno skupnost, ki je spoznavala, kaj ti avtorji, ti umetniki in znanstveniki delajo, kaj Uroš v bistvu je, kaj so metode Uroša, kaj so načini dela Uroša, kaj so cilji Uroša. Se pravi, od premišljevanja sodobnih metod in načinov dela, tehnologije, odprtosti družbe, do vseh fizikalnih, odprtokodnih razmišljanj in načinov dela, ki so ga umetniki, umetnice in avtorji, ki so znani bili v Gorici skozi leta, razvijali, nabrali svoje znanje in so to znanje delili z študenti. Se pravi, se mi zdi, da in X-center in goriško vozlišče in sami študentje so ne samo spoznavali skozi modul neko predstavitveno, razstavno varianto nekega projekta, ampak so v bistvu skozi izobraževalni, delavničarski moment spoznavali, kdo ti ljudje so in na kakšen način ti ljudje delajo. Potem pa se je zgodba še nadaljevala, da se je obiskalo tudi zagrebško radiono oziroma ljubljansko cirkulacijo, kjer so spet ljudje, partnerji, sodelavci Marka, Pavle in nas vseh v vseh teh zadnjih letih. Se pravi, suma sumarum bi človek rekel, da ta začasna laboratorijska situacija spostavlja ta skupnostni moment, kjer se kolektivno dela in razvija, prosto se pretakajo informacije in razvijajo se stvari, ki so, kot smo videli, lahko znanstveno ali kmetijsko ali umetniško ali družbeno uporabne, hkrati pa odprte, da jih narediš sam, cenejše, da so dostopne vsem in odprte tudi za nadaljnji razvoj. Se pravi, ne govorimo o nekih potrošnih black boxih, ki ne veš, kaj se znotraj njega dogaja, oziroma zakaj sploh ta stvar je. In mislim, se mi zdi, da tale odprtost, tole sodelovanje, tole skupno razvijanje, tale kolektivna miselnost, tale deljenje teh vrednot so tiste stvari, ki so enako pomembne kot končni produkt in mislim, da je to tudi eno izmed razmišljanj laboratorijev konsa in teh končnih produktov ali pa teh sodobno umetniško raziskovalnih sodelovanj, ravno v tem, da seveda razvijamo tako programsko, strojno opremo in hkrati tudi iščemo neke nove metode skupnega dela, nove metode deljenja, nove inovativne načine lažjega skupnega preživetja in sodelovanja na planetu.
Okay. Hvala.
No, in Spanish, Paula?
So, en español.
Sí.
Creo que la experiencia que podemos aportar a los estudiantes, da igual de qué rango de edad tengan, es acercarles una tecnología, o sea, acercarles la tecnología de una manera que es abierta, por lo tanto la pueden construir, la pueden replicar. Es muy diferente ser usuarios, it's super different to be just users of the technology, just gaming or being just the ones that they are there sitting in front of the technology, that the ones they rebuild their own technology. I mean, if you carry all this, let's say, transdisciplinarity to people from secondary school, like for arts school or whatever school or whatever age, you open up the idea of we can open this mobile, we can repair this mobile. So we are not really dependent on the technology. We know now how to open, how to change it, and how to rebuild, implement. So people can start to think about, let's say, technologies that they are used for the day life.
And also about the recycling,
Se pravi,
Recycling.
green future and all this
Wow.
stuff. So what's the future? What are the plans for all of us?
Ja.
Let's say the final question for everybody of us.
Jaz bom slovensko začel.
Yeah.
Slovensko.
Se pravi, po celem letu 6-7 projektov znotraj konca je nekaj, kar se bo v naslednjih manj kot 2 letih, dokler se ta kohezijski projekt izteče, moralo zaključiti. Zdaj, in na tem se dela. Temporarni, ta začasni avtonomni laboratorij se danes jutri končuje, ko Pavla in Mark zapuščata Slovenijo in Maribor. Ampak tole razmišljanje, stvari, ki jih Pavla niti ni v španščini povedala, ampak jih potem v angleščini nadaljevala, o intertransdisciplinarnem delu različnih posameznikov, o premišljevanju oziroma biti sposobnemu, ne biti samo potrošnik, ampak tudi predelovati in zgraditi svojo tehnologijo, ki jo potrebuješ. To so pa tiste stvari, ki se bodo nadaljevale. To so tukaj z Markom in s Pavlom imamo, ne bom rekel advokate, ampak to so ljudje, ki to že leta počenjajo in se mi zdi, da tudi v samem koncu skozi izobraževanje, projektno delo in solucijske laboratorije in tudi skozi PR o tem, kaj konc je, poskušamo v bistvu te vrednote in ta razmišljanja, te načine dela, ta znanja deliti in jih preko izobraževanja in preko raziskovalnih projektih implementirati v družbo oziroma v nove generacije, ki prihajajo, ki bodo živele še v bolj digitalno, tehničnem, tehnološkem svetu in je zato še toliko bolj pomembno, da poznajo neke osnove, na čem vsa ta tehnologija in vsa svet bazira in stoji. To je moje.
Yeah.
Vision's future? When are you coming back?
I don't know.
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
And
So Uroš,
No, okay.
the Uroš project is far from finished. So this temporary autonomous lab was just one phase of a very intense, also physical co-presence and hack lab. And we now continue the next couple of months to use and develop these things further in our own context. And the vision since the very beginning of these Uroš activities was that we might even host a larger regional gathering of different players that work on similar topics in a form of some kind of a symposium workshop. So I still hope that maybe next year we can reconvene with this experience of the next couple of months and bring some other players together to organize and host 3-4 days of a workshop/symposium with other friends from the Ghost network, with other friends from the maker hacker spaces in the region.
Maybe, but I would also like to add what is in Uroš itself, and we a little bit are forgetting this, is that from Indonesia, there is also an anthropological group involved in the whole thinking about Uroš, and this is because the project is global, has let's say players all around, and we would like to get also the informations or their ways of how they are dealing with technology, how they are dealing with connecting the industry, connecting the science and art, doing this transdisciplinarity, or even what is using these circles, radical transdisciplinarity. Or so what I wanted to say is da se v samem Urošu dosti dela tudi na tem metodološkem, antropološkem premisleku, izbiranju informacij in virov, kako se nekdo na Japonskem povezuje z industrijo in dela interdisciplinarno, kako nekdo v Argentini, kako nekdo v Indoneziji, kako tu pri nas v Sloveniji, ker spet, če skočimo v strukturo konca, izobraževanje, projekti in solucijski laboratorij za rešitve, to so stvari, ki se globalno dogajajo v tem trenutku, povsod so vozlišča, hubi, laboratoriji, ki to delajo, ampak seveda so kulturni konteksti, družbeni, zgodovinski konteksti različni in Uroš bi rad tudi about these different historical social contexts. We would like to, let's say, do an archive, do like kind of a library also on how let's say people who are connecting art, science, technology, and thinking about open and shared future, how they work, how they exist in their context. I cannot do it in Spanish, so sorry.
Maybe we should finish at this
I think
point.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a fantastic time in Maribor again.
Yes.
I've been already coming this summer twice, and we'll definitely reconvene in Maribor in the next coming months for experimenting with our devices when the sun comes up again in spring, and maybe also in between. And everybody who is listening to this thing, this cast, you should also, join and see on our website. We documented a lot of the projects on the Hectera wiki, on the Uros, and you will find it easily. And also everybody can then also, collaborate or contribute to these projects.
Hvala vsem. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
Mark. Hvala.
Thanks, Xenia. Thanks, Eva.
Ja, za
Thanks.
konec bi dodali
Ja.
samo še to, za vse dodatne informacije, kako se tudi povežemo z Markom, z Pavlo, z Miho, na vse zadnje, s konsom. Vse te informacije so na spletnih straneh. Hvala za vašo pozornost in lep dan oziroma lepo prihodnost še naprej.
Are we on air? No? We done?
Yeah.
Low